Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the program on this Monday, July 27th. Live from Seoul, I'm Shin Se-min. Before we dive right in, these are the stories we're following at the top of the hour. U.S. consulate staff in China's Chengdu are leaving the city in the face of the Monday deadline ordered by Beijing as relations between the world's two superpowers continue to worsen. The state of emergency inside North Korea over a suspected COVID-19 case, a person who had returned from South Korea after illegally crossing the border. Is North Korea officially no longer a virus-free zone? Today marks the day that the UN forces took part in the Korean War, as well as the signing of the Armistice Agreement of the Korean War. We cover that commemorative event marking the heroic efforts of the UN forces during the wartime and the 67th anniversary of the halt to the Korean War. As a retaliatory measures against the Trump administration's order to shut China's consulate general in Houston, Beijing has ordered the U.S. to close down its consulate general in Chengdu by early Monday. Our Kim Hyo-sun leading us off.
The U.S. consulate in China's western city of Chengdu is ready to shut down after Beijing reportedly ordered its closure by Monday morning, providing just 72 hours notice. This comes as the Trump administration ordered the closure of China's consulate in Houston, Texas, accusing China for stealing intellectual property. Beijing's latest move also ratchets up a diplomatic conflict between the two superpowers at a time when relations have sunk to their lowest level in decades. The official insignia of the U.S. consulate in Chengdu, established in 1985, was removed from the building over the weekend, with local residents gathering in front of the diplomatic mission. They seem to be split on the decision.
I approve. The U.S. closed our consulate. I think we should shut theirs too. It has been said many times, if we have a trade war, something should have been done long time ago. China rarely got aggressive. I support China closing all of the U.S. embassy and consulates.
China and the U.S. should handle their relations well through negotiation and international forums, so there won't be more conflicts. I just hope the U.S. can respect China, and China can show willingness to work with the U.S. and handle their relations well.
Following the tit-for-tat move, it remains to be seen what further steps Washington and Beijing will take. Pundits raised the possibility of the countries ordering the shutdown of other diplomatic missions, including the Chinese Consulate General in San Francisco and the U.S. Consulate General in Hong Kong and Macau. Some also predict the world's two largest superpowers could take other retaliatory measures, including economic sanctions. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
And now to the latest on COVID-19 situations. Inside the Hermit Kingdom, North Korea has imposed a maximum emergency system over a suspected COVID-19 case, which, if confirmed, would be the first ever officially recognized case inside that country. Our Hong Yu reports.
North Korea shifted its state emergency anti-epidemic system to the maximum emergency system and issued a top-class alert over the weekend. The decision was reached at an emergency Politburo meeting of the Workers' Party on Saturday that was convened by North Korean leader Kim Jong-un in response to a defector returning to North Korea from South Korea with COVID-19 symptoms. The North state-run Korean Central News Agency reported Sunday that the defector had illegally trespassed the military demarcation line to Kaesong on July 19th, 3 years after defecting to South Korea. The 24-year-old is believed to have swum back to the north after being investigated for rape allegations in the south, according to multiple media reports in South Korea. It added that multiple medical checkups of the man's upper respiratory organ and blood were conducted, which showed an uncertain result that can be described as a suspected case of coronavirus, the first in North Korea. The man has been quarantined along with people that came into contact with him for 5 days in Kaesong. The city has been on a complete lockdown since Friday, when Kim Jong-un was first notified about the matter. At the Politburo meeting, Kim launched an investigation into how the man managed to cross the border and said those responsible would be severely punished. North Korea closed its border in late January to prevent an outbreak of COVID-19 and has so far claimed to have 0 cases. The regime has been emphasizing the need to always wear face masks and strictly practice virus prevention measures. Hong Yu, Arirang News.
Here in South Korea, the government will only permit entry to sailors who have tested negative for COVID-19 prior to arriving in the country, as the nation is facing an increasing amount of imported cases. On top of that, the government may no longer offer free COVID-19 treatment for foreign patients, starting with those who violate quarantine measures. Our Lee Seung-jae with the details.
With strict quarantine measures and guidelines in place, the number of local COVID-19 transmissions has been on a steady decline. The big concern now are the high number of imported cases. Over the past 2 weeks, the nation has been averaging over 31 imported cases a day, 12 more than the previous 2-week average. As a result, the government will now require all sailors on foreign ships to submit a document indicating negative tests within 48 hours of departure and test negative again before they are allowed to dock.
We plan to minimize the number of ships coming in by conducting strict inspections on the crew and only approving the ships if they all tested negative.
The high number of imported cases has also put a strain on the cost of treatment. On Sunday, Prime Minister Chung Se-kyun said South Korea will push to revise the law to require foreign COVID-19 patients to cover the costs of their treatment. He said the increasing number of foreign patients among the imported cases could strain the nation's medical system. He added the country will either make foreign patients pay all or part of the cost for their hospitalization, but under the principle of reciprocity considering diplomatic relations. As it stands, in-hospital and treatment expenses for confirmed patients are covered by the government, regardless of nationality. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Today, July 27th, is the day that the country remembers the heroic efforts of the United Nations forces during the 1950 and 1953 Korean War. Now, it also marks the 67th anniversary of the signing of the Korean Armistice Agreement in 1953. And the country is believed to be holding a commemorative ceremony as we speak, marking the day. And our Defense Ministry correspondent Kim Jong-un with more about the occasion.
South Korea celebrates the UN Forces Participation Day every year on July 27th. The day marks the anniversary of the signing of the Korean War Armistice Agreement in Panmunjom in 1953. The day is set aside to express the country's appreciation for the sacrifice and contributions of some 2 million Korean War veterans from 22 countries that fought alongside South Korean forces under the UN flag. At this year's ceremony, descendants of the veterans currently studying in South Korea will attend the event on behalf of their grandparents who are unable to make it due to the coronavirus outbreak. Also this year, the names of the veterans who died will be roll called. The agreement brought an end to more than 3 years of brutal fighting in which the Allied forces fought to defeat the expansion of communism on the Korean peninsula. To this day, the two Koreas are still divided along the 38th parallel. Once decimated in the aftermath of the Korean War, South Korea has now developed into one of the world's most vibrant, dynamic, and economically prosperous democracies thanks to the veterans. South Korea has forged strong alliances with the countries that came to South Korea's aid in its time of need. There is also an understanding that the alliance with the UN is vital to peace and stability on the peninsula and in Northeast Asia. Kim Jong-un, Arirang News.
U.S. President Donald Trump has stressed the importance of the ironclad alliance between South Korea and the United States in a proclamation marking the 67th anniversary of the Korean War Armistice Day. Released by the White House on Sunday, President Trump said the ironclad alliance, which was, quote, forged in war and reinforced by a shared love of liberty and deep ties of friendship, is vital to peace and stability, not just in Asia, but to the world as well. He also noted that South Korea was, quote, once decimated in the aftermath of the war, but is now one of the world's most prosperous democracies and one of the U.S.'s strongest allies. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un hosted an event marking the 67th anniversary of the signing of the Korean War Armistice Agreement. Now, the regime's state-run Korean Central News Agency reported Monday that Kim paid his respects to the North's fallen soldiers, saying their combat mentality will always be remembered as the spirit of socialism. On Sunday, Kim also awarded key military command personnel new pistols called 백두산. He said he had high hopes such a weapon of revolution can help the North achieve its self-reliance of revolution. So, as previously mentioned, today, July 27th, marks the day that the country remembers the participation of the United Nations forces during the Korean War, and it also marks the 67th anniversary of the signing of the Korean Armistice Agreement, putting an ongoing pause to the Korean War. Now, in moments' time, we will be crossing over to the live shots of the ceremony being held at Dongdaemun Design Plaza, or DDP, and cover the commemorative event from then on. And just to give you some background information, the UN Forces Participation Day was first designated by the South Korean government in 2013 to make sure that future generations inherit the legacy of sacrifice and contribution created by all service members from the 22 countries that stood alongside South Korea on the front lines of the war. And once we do cross over to the site of the event, we are expected to cut into the middle of the ceremony, though, starting with a speech by General Robert Abrams, the commander of U.S. Forces Korea and also the Combined Forces Command. And about the ceremony, it is called the Days of Glory. That's the slogan for today's ceremony. And the event is set to focus on expressing appreciation for the sacrifice and contribution of nearly 2 million veterans who took part in the Korean War. At the event, some 200 people will be taking part, including a diplomatic corps from some of the 22 nations. And of course, the event will take place under the health and safety guidelines to help prevent the spread of COVID-19 in this time of pandemic. Now, today's event is going to be held by the Prime Minister of Chung Se-gyun as well. And that is the ceremony that we're cutting to. That's the live screen that we're getting from Dongdaemun Design Plaza, where the event is being held.
바로
At ease.
모두 자리에 앉아주시기
Please be
바랍니다.
seated. Next, on behalf of the UN Korean War veterans, General Robert Abrams, commander of the UN Command, will give his remarks.
안녕하십니까. Prime Minister Chung, Ambassador Harris, Mr. Zhong, Mr. Park, General Park Han-gi, honored guests, friends and family of the Republic of Korea United States Alliance. It is an incredible honor to commemorate the 67th anniversary of the Armistice Agreement as the commander of United Nations Command, Combined Forces Command, and U.S. Forces Korea. Thank you. Thank you for your continued support to our ironclad alliance. I would like to take a moment to recognize our guests in the audience who have a deeply personal connection to the Korean War, who traveled from near and far, and those watching the broadcasts. I am humbled to join you on this special day. Thank you for your presence today. The Korean War was a great tragedy in human history. It left the Korean Peninsula in rubble and caused immense suffering for the Korean people. Approximately 1 million civilians were killed, wounded, or missing. 60,000 children were orphaned, and 600,000 homes were destroyed. It left a nation and a people divided. 67 years ago today, the leaders of United Nations Command, the Korea People's Army, and the Chinese People's Volunteer Army signed the Armistice Agreement in the tiny village of Panmunjom. It took nearly 200 negotiation sessions that lasted 400 hours and spanned a period over 2 arduous years to reach the agreement. Today, we reflect on what the Armistice Agreement means and why we carry out its provisions decades after what was supposed to be a temporary military ceasefire. The preamble of the Armistice Agreement clearly states the purpose and is worthy of reading today. In the interest of stopping the Korean conflict, with its great toil of suffering and bloodshed on both sides, and with the objective of establishing an armistice which will ensure a complete cessation of hostilities and of all acts of armed force in Korea until a final peaceful settlement is achieved. 67 years later, our shared commitment to this goal endures, and it is stronger than ever. May our nations not grow weary in the pursuit of a final peaceful settlement in Korea. Today, we salute our men and women in uniform, both past and present, ordinary people who achieved and continue to achieve extraordinary feats. We honor those who made the Armistice Agreement possible by defending the line along the 38th parallel, and those who died in the acts of violence while maintaining the Armistice Agreement, and those who shoulder the responsibility to maintain the Armistice Agreement today. Freedom is not free, and neither is peace. We also celebrate the Republic of Korea's achievements that were made possible by the cessation of major hostilities that the Armistice Agreement preserved. The Republic of Korea emerged from the embers of war to a mature and vibrant democracy, a leader in innovation and culture, and produced what is widely known as the miracle on the Han River. Our ability to gather peacefully in this thriving capital demonstrates what is possible during an armistice in a dynamic region. We remain under the unblinking watch and protection of our armed forces, in the austere guard posts along the demilitarized zone, on the waters of the northern limit line, at freedom's frontier. The Republic of Korea's ability to thrive in armistice brings hope to nations around the world. In commemoration of this 67th anniversary, may we pause to reflect on what the armistice means, celebrate the achievements of past generations, and reaffirm our commitment to achieve a final peaceful settlement in Korea as the signatories of the Armistice Agreement intended 67 years ago today. Special thanks to Minister Park and the Ministry of Patriots and Veterans Affairs for hosting this world-class event. 감사합니다. 같이 갑시다.
7 decades ago, to defend the Republic of Korea, which was facing a state of crisis, 1.95 million UN forces from 22 countries were united.
Years ago, my grandfather, Colonel Edward H. Forney, one of the top amphibious experts in the United States Marine Corps at the time, and his good friend, Dr. Hyun Bong-hak, a civil affairs officer with the U.S. Army, came together to do the right thing for the right reasons during some of the darkest days of the Korean War. Colonel Forney and Dr. Hyun listened to their better angels and together helped rescue 100,000 North Koreans fleeing from the approaching communists. My grandfather had a great affection for Dr. Hyun and all the Korean people, and he made it a priority to load as many refugees as possible onto those waiting ships at Hungnam. He knew it was the right thing to do. He knew it was the honorable thing to do. Weeks after the largest humanitarian operation of the Korean War ended on December 24th, 1950, Colonel Forney wrote a letter to Dr. Hyun. And this is what he said to his friend who had advocated so strongly for the Korean refugees. Your praise for my work in the evacuation of the civilians from Hungnam was very heartwarming. I feel very proud of that operation, and naturally, as the operation recedes in history, I will find a greater pride in having been there and done my part. I will never forget the look on your face when you knew that over 100,000 from your own part of the country had been saved. That look was sufficient thanks. My grandfather died when I was 2 years old, but if he were here today and if he could see this great country, he would be so proud. He loved Korea, and I love Korea. Thank you. 감사합니다.
The Chinese have broken through and are entering into Hunan. Pull back all civilian units now.
Captain, how many refugees can you fit on this ship?
Loaded with tanks and mortars, sir! With light ammunition gun launcher, sir! There's no room for the Koreans! Order from the general! Unload all arms and drop them into the sea! Let's have all refugees on board!
On December 23, 1950, a boat that has left the Hunan port arrived on the southern coast of Koje on December 25th. During their journey, 5 babies were born. The Christmas miracle was the largest humanitarian operation in history. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Lee Kyung-pil. I currently run an animal hospital named Peace in Koje. When I was young, my parents told me this story. They told me that I was born on a cargo compartment of a very large ship. It was crowded with people, and there I was born. They had no scissors, so they had to cut the umbilical cord with their teeth. The boat that they told me about was indeed the Meredith Victory vessel. With the efforts put forth by Captain LaRue, Colonel Forney, and Dr. Hyun Bong-hak, over 14,000 people aboard the ship and evacuated from the port of Hungnam in North Korea. And I was one of the 5 babies that were delivered on the vessel. This happened on December 25, 1920. Many call this the miracle of Christmas. However, I remember this as sacrifice rather than a miracle. On the frozen Changjin Reservoir, UN soldiers took part in a hellish battle. This became an invaluable time for the refugees to walk all the way to the port of Hungnam. Until the moment when all the refugees were on board the ship, the deaths of the UN soldiers who protected the front lines became the new lives of my parents who safely aboard the ship. Thanks to the sacrifice of the many war veterans, I was born. And today I stand here as a 70-year-old man. Now I would like to deliver this message that I engraved deeply in my heart to the war veterans who spent their very last moments in this foreign country. Your sacrifice had led to a birth of a baby who is living a humble life that you had once dreamed of. He got married, had children, and is aging peacefully. This is the peace that you've made and also the miracle. Every day is a day of glory. You will never be forgotten. Thank you very much. A war veteran has once said that every moment he has fought for the liberty and peace for the Republic of Korea was glory. However, like the sacrifice of the heroes that have emerged through the bitter coldness on the Changdu Reservoir, the noble moment safeguarded together by 22 nations that have fought during the war is indeed the most painful but valuable moments of glory. We will never forget. And thank you very much. Now the war veterans have aged. Here we have prepared a special video of the memories and records of the UN war veterans. Days of Glory. Please enjoy. Luxembourg.
70년 전
7 decades ago,
한국당에서 젊음을 바쳤던
a lot of the global youths have participated in the Korean War, and one more person has lost his
한국에서 보낸
life.
희생의 시간들은
The time of sacrifice that he has spent in South Korea has been left as numerous government medals.
함께 전쟁터를 누볐던 시간들을 기억하며
Remembering the time that we fought together, the comrades also sent last farewell. The days of glory.
낯선 한반도에서
On the Korean peninsula, the first Korean War broke out. It was full of fear.
It was raining cats and dogs. Could hardly see anything. And then the real soldiers came running over the hills and ik denk, oei, daar ga je. En een klap. Zelden zo harde klap gehoord.
It was a very loud bomb.
어떤 병사는
Some soldiers, they became prisoners of war, and they were wounded. My friend died, and I had to watch him being killed. We marched very long. It was bitterly cold. I never thought that I would make back to my country. Nevertheless, the march couldn't stop because of one reason. Those who lost the lives and their families. And we began to realize what we need to do here.
지켜야 할 사람들을 위해
For the people that we had to safeguard, they marched forward.
그리고 그 속에서 함께 행군하던
And they marched together with the comrades who even had to face death.
Friends died on the last night in Korea. He got shot in a patrol. And when I was doing my other interview with Martin Besant, one of my other friends who was with him, I said, well, when he died, what was it like? And he said, well, his last words were, don't tell my mum.
We had lived together, however, they were not able to come back. 7 decades have passed, but it is a painful history that we cannot forget. The war veterans that have been aged, they send this special salute.
I called it the Korean veteran, and it's long forgotten by their country. Men who fought on distant land, young men wounded, young men crying, young men bleeding, young men dying. Was their sacrifice in vain? Happy children, so beguiling, laughing, jumping, skipping, smiling, fill the land of morning calm, all now safe and free from harm. Thanks to every mother's son who fought for each and every one, showing that despite the pain, their valiant efforts weren't in vain.
우리의 가슴에
In our
님들의 이름을
hearts, re-engrave
감사로
your
새깁니다.
names.
다음은 국무총리께서
Next, marking the UN
참전의
Forces
날을 맞아
Participation
6.25
Day, the Prime
참전과
Minister
UN
will award
참전
government
용사의
medals to the
명예
individuals
사냥을
of
통해
merit who
자유민주주의
have
수요에
contributed to
기여한
safeguarding the
유공자에
country's liberal
대해
democracy by
정부
fighting in the
포상을
Korean War.
오늘 수상하실 분은
We have a total of 4
분입니다.
recipients
호명되신
today.
수상자께서는
Please come up to the
단상으로
podium when
올라와
your
주시기
names are
바랍니다.
called out.
먼저 국민훈장
First
수상자
Order of
샬럿
Civil Merit
오케이님입니다.
awarded to Miss Charlotte O'Kane.
훈장증
Certificates of Order, British Korean Veterans Association, National Overseas Coordinator Miss Charlotte O'Kane. The above person has contributed greatly to safeguarding the liberal democracy of the Republic of Korea, and thus the following order is awarded in accordance with the country's constitution. It is being awarded to Deputy British Ambassador to South Korea Nikish Mehta. Miss Charlotte O'Kane is the spouse of the late Henry O'Kane, who is a Korean War veteran. She established the British Korean Veterans Association and has contributed to raising the dignity of the war veterans. Next, Presidential Commendation Award. It is a group award being awarded to Barnstable County, Massachusetts, the USA. Presidential Citation, City of Barnstable, Massachusetts, the US. The content is the same as above. July 27, 2020, President. It is being awarded to U.S. Ambassador to South Korea, Harry Harris. The city of Barnstable has provided free of charge the fields to house the Korean War Veteran Memorial Monument and has been responsible for the maintenance of the monument. Next, the Korean War Veterans Association of the Netherlands. And the detail is the same as above. July 27, 2020, President. It is being awarded to Dutch Parliamentary Council of South Korea. And next, Presidential Citation Award to Miss Bang Mi-hee. Presidential Commendation Award, Luxembourg Korean War Veteran Association member Bang Mi-hee. The detail is same as above. July 27, 2020, President. It is being awarded to representative of Luxembourg Trade and Investment Office in Seoul, Miss Kim Yoon-hee. Miss Bang Mi-hee is a member of the Luxembourg Korean War Veteran Association. Congratulations. And next we have the commemorative speech by Prime Minister.
존경하는 국민 여러분,
fellow Koreans, Korean War veterans, and their descendants, Your Excellencies, ambassadors, and ladies and gentlemen. We have gathered here today to commemorate the UN Forces Participation Day and to remember the meaning of this day. First, I pay respect to the fallen UN soldiers and war heroes who sacrificed their lives to safeguard the liberty and peace on the Republic of Korea. I also extend my words of comfort to the war veterans who are still suffering from the wounds of the war. Today, marking the UN Forces Participation Day, we had planned to invite the war veterans from abroad, but we were unable to do so with the COVID-19 pandemic. But we have 9 special guests who are the descendants of the war veterans. They are those who are studying with the scholarship given by the Korean government. Please join me in welcoming them with a big hand. I sincerely hope that you can achieve your dreams and return safely back to your respective home countries. And I would also like to thank and congratulate the 4 awardees who have received government medals today. This year marks the 70th anniversary of the outbreak of the Korean War. 7 decades ago, the UN has decided to establish the UN Command to safeguard the Republic of Korea from the ravages of the war. In the summer of the same year, the youths around the world came to a foreign land called the Republic of Korea. They have become united under the UN flag and to fight for the country. And they had to endure their longings for their home countries, and they also fought for the country. They treated the wounded and looked after children who have become orphans. From the first exchange of fire between the U.S. soldiers and North Korean soldiers, the Osan Battle, and 3 years on, some 1.95 million people fought to safeguard the country. Nearly 37,000 have died, with over 103,000 wounded. The sacrifice and the contribution of the UN forces have become the groundwork for liberty, peace, and prosperity of today's Republic of Korea. It has now become a country that helps others from one that has received the help of the international community. It is also exerting its duty as a member of the international community by helping with peacekeeping, war recovery, and medical support missions in 13 countries around the world. And most recently, we also took part in overcoming the global COVID-19 pandemic. We have sent our face masks and diagnostic kits, as well as other quarantine supplies, to countries around the world, including those that have fought during the Korean War. We are also proactively taking part in the global coordination to enable universal access to vaccine and treatment. As you have did 7 decades ago, today's Republic of Korea is exerting its utmost efforts to realize global peace and the safety of the human race. Ladies and gentlemen, as there is no boundary in safeguarding peace of the humanity, there is no boundary in veterans' affairs. Marking the 70th anniversary of the Korean War, we are carrying out various veterans' events to pay back to the sacrifice and dedication put forth by the UN war veterans. We have hosted the commemorative concert to remember the war veterans that have sent peace plate to the diplomatic corps representing the countries that fought during the war. On June 25th, we successfully sent the remains of the 6 U.S. war heroes back to their home country. And in March, we enacted the Act on Heightening the Dignity of the War Veterans to lay the legal groundwork to more systematically carry out respect and exchange with UN war veterans and their respective countries. On November 11th, we will prepare in earnest the upcoming International Memorial Day for the UN war veterans. Going forward, the Republic of Korea will eternally remember the spirit of the UN exhorted by every single one of the war veterans. Fellow Korean citizens, despite the sacrifice of the UN forces 7 decades ago and our efforts, the door to peace on the Korean Peninsula has yet to be opened fully. There are times when the door of peace feels afar. Nevertheless, we know very well that there is nothing we can do without peace. The government will succeed on the spirit of the Korean War veterans and play its duty to safeguard security and peace. We will carry out what we can step by step and seek a new way forward achieving peace. Achieving peace on the Korean Peninsula is the best reward to the sacrifice and dedication put forth by the war veterans. To speed up such day, we ask the UN war veterans and their families to continue to send your support. Thank you very much.
네, 총리님 말씀 감사합니다.
There you have it. Just to recap some of the things that we heard from Prime Minister Chung Se-kyun, he appreciated the sacrifice and commitment by United Nations forces who took part in the Korean War in the 1950s, which eventually led to liberty, peace, and prosperity here in South Korea. And as a payback to that, the Prime Minister added that the South Korean government has been supporting combatant nations with protective face masks and diagnostic kits in this time of COVID-19 pandemic. Now, that will do it for this edition of Arirang News, but we'll be back with more of the day's headlines with a comprehensive news lineup coming up at noon Korea time, so do stay close. As always, thanks for watching and goodbye.